Alright everyone, we are continuing our celebration of India's Independence Day by watching another program dedicated to India. This time we are watching one called Industrial India. That should be very different from the two programs we've watched so far. Industrial India by the Ministry of Information Films Division, the same production company that we've watched for most of these Indian programs. And this was published back in 1963. So what I imagine this is about is India trying to catch up its industrial base, which should be interesting because I know next to nothing about India's industry. So let's dive in, shall we? Oh, already an interesting thought that I had that I feel like is a good lens to go into this with is that for most of these programs, we've learned how Indian people have some sort of respect for nature one way or the other. Whether it's through Hinduism or Sikhism, Jainism, or whatever it is. But most Indian people have some degree of respect for nature. So this program should be interesting because we're learning about the industrial side of India, which doesn't really have anything to do with India besides the fact that industry and our natural world almost are always in conflict with one another. So this should be interesting as it will show how Indian people who do respect nature, ultimately industrialized anyway. And hopefully we get to see some of the friction between India's culture and India's industrialization, right? I think that's a very interesting thing to look out for, is how did Indian people specifically industrialize? How did Indian culture, how did Hindu culture and respect for nature influence their industrialization? That's a very good question, and hopefully we can answer it a little after watching this. So let's keep going, right? Oh yeah, that classic like sitar strum. Like I never feel more at home than hearing that strum. Oh man, already though, we're getting a different sort of Indian musicality. Like we get that opening strum, but now we're into like the Indian like mystical mystery sort of music, which again is just different than the sort of music you hear in these sorts of programs that were made in America, right? Like even though it's still mystery music, it's Indian mystery music. And it's just, I always enjoy hearing the different flavors of Indian music that come in these programs because I've heard all these different sort of moods played through Western music, but it's completely different to hear music with the same purpose or the same mood from a different culture. It's interesting and it's different and it's worth paying attention to, I think. Again, I'm not a musician. I'm not really capable of like dissecting what exactly it is about this music that makes it like mysterious or whatever, but I can appreciate that we are getting a different sort of mood than what most Indian music played through these programs is. But it's also cool, we're getting these very stark black and white shots of these industrial buildings. The filmmakers are very clearly trying to establish a tone right here for us. And that tone is already like not negative, but not like super joyous, patriotic Indian, like it's not the same sort of music that was playing at the intro. Like already the music is laid back and kind of suspicious, which is good because that's kind of how I'd expect the Indian people to view industrialization, right? Like industrialization was a machine destroying like the natural order of things. So it makes sense that Indian people were a little suspicious or a little, not so gung-ho about industrialization, at least at the beginning. But let's actually start watching so we can actually get some context, right?
This is a story with a beginning, but it has no end.
Story with a beginning but no end. I feel like, again, we're already hitting that like Indian poetic language use, right? Like that's just already, I could dissect what he just said, but like, yeah, there is a beginning to India's industrialization, but what they're suggesting is that there is no end to India's industrialization, which is interesting, especially in a modern sense, but let's keep watching.
The outlines of the story are the silhouettes of factories.
See, the outlines of the story are the silhouettes of the factories. Like, I hope I'm not saying this for every sentence this guy says, but like there is something so poetic about the way they explain what they're talking about. Like it really is like you have to appreciate it.
This is the story of industrial India.
Yeah, see, like even the sound effect they have played for industrial India kind of tells you how the people working on this viewed industrial India, right? Like industrial in this sense, in this place, is like seemingly not a good thing. Like obviously there were good aspects of industrialization, like more people got fed, more people had jobs and that sort of stuff, but also a lot more of the natural world was destroyed. So we're already getting this tension within Indian culture around industrialization, which is very good. I'm glad I'm picking up on that. You know, like if this was made in America, I feel like industrialization would just be like a purely positive thing. Like everything I've watched on old America, like building railroads, building factories, that was good. Cutting down forests, opening new mines, that was all good, especially during this part of American history. So to see industrialism being treated with a less than optimistic tone is kind of refreshing and it's nice. I definitely appreciate the way in which these Indian people are approaching industrialization. I think it's very nuanced. I think it's very intelligent. But all right, we haven't even gotten through the credits, so let's just say everyone's name real quick. So the producer in charge was K.L. Kandapur. I feel like I recognize this guy's name. K.L. Kandapur, I feel like we've watched some of his stuff before. The direction is by Shanti Varma, which is Shanti a boy name or a girl name? In my like English brain, Shanti sounds like a girl name, but it's probably a boy name. The operative cameraman was H.S. Advani and B. Khosla. The sound was by Raghavendra Rao. All right, the music, we got to shout out this guy. This is by L.R. Bhatt. All right, L.R. Bhatt, that's the music. Editing was by U.H. Rao. I wonder if he was related to the sound guy or if that's just like a common last name or something. The words, or I guess the script, was by K. Srinivas. I can't see with the little logo over his last name. Srinigasgare, probably. And then the voice, the guy we're listening to, is Zul Villani. And this is actually the guy who voiced the last program we watched too. So this is actually a well-known, or at least within our circle, a well-known Indian voice actor. This is good. This is good that I'm starting to recognize like these Indian like voice actors and film producers. I feel like I'm starting to like build up an actual base of knowledge on like this subject. But let's keep going, right? This is just the credits. We actually got to get into the program eventually. Yeah, but all right. One last shout out to L.R. Bhatt for the music. Like I'm already jamming out to this. Hang on. So these are Indian factories, presumably. So this is crazy. Like already, I did not expect India to be so industrialized by this point. I feel like that's pretty much what I've said every single time I've watched something on India. But it's true. There are just factories for as far as the eye can see here. And that's really just not what my brain's image of India is. Like it's not about like the advancement of their society or anything. It's just like I did not think India had factories like this all the way back then. But I guess they did. I guess that's what we're learning, is that India was an industrial powerhouse all the way back in the 50s already. I guess maybe the reason a lot of people don't associate industry with India is that most of India's industry is probably taken up with supplying India's own population. You know, like I bet there's probably not a lot of stuff to sell after selling everything to Indian people already. I feel like all the bags of rice that they're packing in these factories or whatever they're doing, I feel like all of that is going back to the Indian consumer. So we might just not really associate industrialism with India because all of that went to serve the Indians, whereas industrialism in America was to create products to sell abroad. So that is a bit of a different sort of industrialism. But I don't doubt that they were also trying to sell their goods from these factories as well. This is a bit of an abrasive sound effect though. Like I don't really want to listen to this siren for like the next 20 seconds, but let's go. But again, I think the point of including that siren or that like a really harmful sound effect is just to like have us immediately associate industrial areas with like negative stimulus. You know, like the fact that they're playing a siren while showing us a panorama of this industrial hellscape is really like hitting home how little appreciation these people had for the industrial landscape.
Another day begins. The call for work fills the morning.
Oh, that was the call for work? That's funny. That was a bit of a harsh sound for a call to work.
In response, millions of workers stream into the factories around the country.
Dang, this is crazy though, like just how many Indian people were already occupied in factory work all the way back in the 1950s. Like it never ceases to amaze me just like how many people there are in India. Like this crowd is a big crowd by like modern American standards, but this in India is like nothing, you know? This is cool though that we're getting to see Indian people commuting to their factory jobs. Like again, this is just a snapshot of what life in India from the 50s and I guess 60s probably looked like. You know, like we're getting to see people's dads going to work for the day. It's just like it's interesting.
It is a fairly familiar sight. Yet not long ago, it was not all that familiar.
I do also appreciate that they acknowledge that, right? How not that long ago in India's history were there just like no industrial factories whatsoever. Like these factories definitely came as a result of British colonialism. Like it or hate it, like I don't think they would have had factories like this if they were in a British colony at one point. These factories were definitely a new development in the Indian history and a development that occurred mostly due to the British. We also have to remember that the British were the first people to really ever industrialize. Like the Industrial Revolution got started pretty much in England. So it makes sense that the English brought their industrial knowledge to India. I wonder how Indians internalize that, you know, like do they actually think that they learned all this stuff from Westerners? Because I feel like, you know, people get proud and they don't want to admit that like, oh, all this like amazing new technology came from somewhere else. I'm curious how Indian people themselves view their industrialization.
There was a time when workers like Madhav were strangers to these familiar surroundings.
Like obviously it was still all Indian people actually working in the factories, but how much of it was a result of like Indian, I don't know, advances in technology, you know? I'm curious.
A little over a decade ago, around 1950, Madhav was just a blacksmith.
This guy's name is Mathur. That's interesting. So this guy was just a blacksmith. 10 years ago, this guy was just a blacksmith. Where is he now? Let's see.
Working with outdated implements, his was a hard life in search of a living. It does not really matter where he lived or where he hailed from. For the village he lived in could have been any of the innumerable villages of India. His family and his aspirations for a better life, akin to many other families and countless other aspirations. But how does one turn?
So that's interesting. So they're saying that 10 years ago he was a metal worker, whatever, but he had aspirations to improve his family's life. And I think that they're going to connect improving your family's life with him getting a job in the factory, right? Like the factory is providing for these people a stable, secure, reliable income. And that's what allows people to invest in their own futures, which is interesting. It's definitely true, right? Like it's definitely true that offering people work creates a stable economic system. It's just like, I don't know what else came along with that. Or better yet, I don't know what they left behind in order to achieve that factory job stability, you know?
Turn aspirations into fulfillment, dreams into reality.
It is really funny, though, that we are getting to see, like, everyday life of Indian people still. Like, this kid is just receiving a hand bath from his mother, presumably. Like, that is just a snapshot into daily life of India again. Like, we are just seeing how people lived their lives back then. I bet people still do this in India, though.
The plant that has come to Madhav's village.
Dude, look how ginormous this factory is, too. Like, I don't know if it's just because I don't work in factories, but, like, it blows my mind that we have buildings this big, you know?
Is the answer. The beginning of an effort.
Like, oh my God, they're still going. Like, the shot is still panning over this one building. That is insane.
But how did this plant come to be here? Or some other in a different place, in yet another village?
That is also crazy that like back then they were just building these huge factories like next to just villages. You know, like there weren't these huge urban industrial centers yet. So they just had to build the factories wherever the people were, and the people were in their villages. So you ended up with factories pretty much in the middle of nowhere so that they could actually be filled with workers. It's just like that's another interesting difference between like Indian factories and American factories. I feel like in America people lived like next to the factories in cities for a specific reason. Whereas here in India, like people had the factories out in the villages because that's where the people were. Like in America, people would move to be close to their work in a factory. Whereas in India, they moved the factory into the villages so that the villagers could work at them. It's an interesting difference, you know?
The answer lies in the response to Madhav's urge and that of millions of other urges. In planning for prosperity, in the 5-year plans, which began in 1951.
The 5-year plans that began in 1951. If I remember correctly, that's going to be important for the next program we watch. So just keep that in the back of your minds. So what are they making right here? Are these like hubcaps for cars or something? It looks like they're making like really heavy metal plates for something. I always get so curious about this sort of stuff. Like what are they actually making here? Like I don't know. Like it looks like a factory where they're making something, but I can't actually figure out what the product is.
The factories and chimneys that now dot the skyline are the first intimations of a new order.
That is interesting. Like it really was the arrival of like the modern age in India. Like it's hard to imagine a place where there hadn't been factories for like 3,000 years and then all of a sudden there were factories everywhere. It's hard to really understand, but there were still people, there were still like Indian peasants during this time. Like there were still just villagers who had lived the same exact way their ancestors lived for like thousands of years at this point. So this really was a collision between the modern world and, the historical India. And also, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm starting to pick up like a little bit of disdain for these industrial areas from the narrator. Like it seems like even they don't really like the fact that there are smokestacks everywhere. Like they said there's smokestacks everywhere now. Like it feels like they already don't like the industry, but maybe that's just me. But then, yeah, you get all these shots of like what is, to me, like the ugliest place on earth. It's just, industrial hellscape. It's not that it's India. It's just, I don't really appreciate the aesthetics of industrial wastelands like this. And I'm pretty sure the filmmakers understand that. I'm pretty sure the filmmakers are showing us shots of all these smokestacks to communicate to us how ugly of a place this truly is. Or again, maybe that's just my read on it.
To begin at the beginning.
But yeah, look how ugly this place is. Like, again, it's not that it's India, it's that it's an industrial wasteland. Like, this is just like the last environment a human was ever meant to be in. It's so gross to even look at. I totally understand why some Indian people would not be a fan of this.
There is steel. This metal has come to symbolize the age we live in. Steel.
Hang on, these are like ginormous like cauldrons of like molten metal, right? Like this is actually insane what we're getting to watch. This is such a blue video. I was worried that this wouldn't be a blue video, but it's totally a blue now that we're getting to see it.
Touches every aspect of life. That is why Bhilai, Durgapur and Rourkela. That is why Bokaro in the near future.
Hang on, did you guys understand that? I didn't really catch what he was saying. It seemed like he was using actual like Hindi terms, so I didn't really pick up on what he was saying. But maybe some of you guys did. So let me know if you understood what he was just saying right there.
Each one of them with the capacity to manufacture 1 million tons of steel a year. And
hang on, so these are all steel factories. That is interesting because that is like the base of industrialization, right? You have to figure out how to make your raw materials, or you have to figure out how to make your refined materials from raw materials, or else you have no ability for industry, right? If you can't refine your raw materials, then you can't really make anything. So it makes sense that some of the first factories in India were about producing steel. That's pretty much what allows you to create more machines for more factories.
Of steel a year. And when they're expanded to increase production by nearly 6 times in the near future,
And that's crazy to think about too. Like the rate at which India's economy was growing at this time, like they were going to increase their steel production by 6 times. Like imagine investing in India during this time. Like there's just so much rapid growth taking place.
Steel will have taken its rightful place in the nation's industrial development.
This is crazy that it is just lifting like a giant mass of molten metal. Like I'm pretty sure it's glowing hot in this frame. They are lifting like a burning hot rock. That is just wild.
In the story of this compressed metal is locked a significant part of the story of industrial India.
That's interesting. So they're making the argument that in the story of steel is partially the story of industrial India as well, which is interesting because I was saying that a second ago. Before you can even have an industrial base, you need the ability to create products like steel. So I do understand what he's getting at with that statement.
When stretched, if elaborated, that story can be seen to have many facets, different dimensions. Aluminium, for example. It is a
Aluminium. It's so funny that they say aluminum in the British way rather than the American way. Like, I guess it makes sense. Obviously, they were colonized by the British. It's really funny to hear aluminium, not in like a British accent, but an Indian accent. You know, it's funny. It's funny to my American ears.
Versatile metal used for a variety of productive purposes, and new uses are being discovered constantly. So
Yeah, I feel like this is the age of like new uses of aluminum. So like this is a very interesting time in that mineral's history, I guess.
As we produce around 18,000 tons of aluminium, we are planning to more than quadruple it by 1966.
See, again, they're planning on quadrupling their output of aluminum. Like, again, this was definitely the time to be investing in India.
Metal.
And this is so cool. We're actually getting to see like the metal working taking place in the Indian factories from 1960. Like I hope we all appreciate that like you can't see stuff like this anymore. Or I guess maybe you could see this, but like you can't see it from this long ago. And you don't get to see cool stuff like where they store like all these ingots of like aluminum. I feel like we're getting like a behind the scenes look at this sort of stuff as well. Like not only are we seeing this stuff from a very long time ago, but we're getting to see parts of it that I don't think any normal person ever would have gotten to see either.
Are only the means to an end, not an end in themselves.
Geez, look at all this aluminum though. Isn't that crazy? Like India is such a place like that where it's just like it has so many of everything. Like even like, I don't know, it's just like how many aluminum ingots do you have to have in this little area? And it keeps on going. Holy crap, there is so much aluminum.
And so enterprises like the Hindustan Machine Tools have come into being to manufacture machines.
That's cool. See, this is like level 2 of industrialization. Like level 1 is getting resources like steel and aluminum. Level 2 is making your own machines to make products for you. You know, like that might be level 3 or level 4 industrialization, honestly. Like this is actually really impressive to see an assembly line where the product on the assembly line is a machine meant to operate in an assembly line. You know, like that's multiple levels of industrialization is what I'm trying to say.
Machines for making machines.
Yeah, machines for making machines. It's just like, oh, okay, it's just like, okay, we're several levels deep at this point.
Other machine tool works are joining this pioneer venture.
Like, am I the only one like really impressed by like how big and like how functional these factories are? I don't know. I did not picture this existing in India at this time.
In the near future.
Hang on, let's look at the brand of this machine though. This brand or this print is a Boehringer. I wonder if that like machine brand is still around. It almost honestly seems a little familiar, but it's interesting to see the brands or the origins of the machines they're using to make their machines with. Again, you do need some interaction with the West or with Europe in order to get these machines so that you can jumpstart your own industrialization. You know, it reveals how necessary contact with Europe and the West really was if you wanted to advance your society during this time. And maybe the most interesting aspect of this is that India was definitely one of the countries that embraced that the most, right? India definitely took as much as they could from the Western ideas and then used that for their own purposes, which again is just what every civilization does. It's interesting to see India doing that. This is how India, the country, whatever, you can just leave it at that.
The measure of self-sufficiency lies in our ability to manufacture for ourselves and in the manner we feed our factories with raw materials and transport the finished goods for marketing.
See, it's so funny because we're seeing all these shots of like all these super complicated machines doing these very simple repetitive tasks, and like I'm here wondering, like, what are we watching happening right now? What machine is being built? Like what product is being produced right here? Like I have no idea of knowing based on this one shot, but I'm so curious,
The job of the railways, to cover the land, to bring people together, to keep the factories going, all demanding expansion of the railway network.
Yeah, I guess that's like step 2 of industrialization. Like once you actually have factories producing stuff, you need a way of transporting those materials across your country so that if like your steel factory can produce steel and then another factory somewhere else can use that steel to make a product, you need to get that product between those two factories. So yes, building the railroad was very, very pivotal to the industrial movement, not only in India, but again, in any country that was industrializing.
The decade, therefore, has witnessed the laying of nearly 2,000 kilometers of new lines, the doubling of over 2,000 kilometers of single track.
And this must have been such an era of getting stuff done. Like, I definitely can relate to that as an American. This was definitely also the era of Americans getting shit done. But I feel like it was even more so in India because they were playing catch up and there was so much that they had to build. Like, they just started building railroads. Like, I feel like in America, railroads pretty much existed for as long as railroads did exist. But in India, railroads existed and then they had to be brought and taught to the Indian people, and then they had to build their own railroads. So there was a bit of a lag between when the Indians built their railroads and when railroads were first available in the world. And what that means is that for a time, India was catching up so fast. Like, India had to catch up, but they were doing it so fast, Like, they weren't just building one railroad. They were building railroads all across their ginormous country. It's so incredible to think of India pre-industrialization and India post-industrialization. It must have been such a crazy moment in the country's history. Like so much was happening, even compared to other industrializing countries.
And the commissioning of a considerable amount of rolling stock. But what use lines? And how long can the locomotives, the wagons and the coaches last if we cannot make them ourselves? So Chittaranjan came into being.
See, again, you keep hearing these very intelligent understandings from these people, right? Like, what point is it to have railroads if we can't build them and maintain them ourselves? So we need to be able to do that. So you can see them understanding the necessity of industry and what they need in order to achieve proper industrial success. Like, if they just relied on European countries for every, industrial luxury, then they wouldn't be industrialized. They would just be buying industrial goods. But here you can clearly see the vision is to actually industrialize India itself. And that's a very intelligent design.
Aided by Jamshedpur in the manufacture of locomotives.
But at the same time, I'm still really amazed that they were building these trains. This is such a complex machine. It shows such mastery at such an early state in this industrialization. I really hope my Indian audience doesn't get insulted whenever I'm surprised by stuff like this. This sort of stuff just helps me understand India so much better. I feel like I'm shaking off all my misconceptions of India by watching this sort of stuff.
To the changing pattern of things, Chittaranjan is also building diesel and electric locomotives.
Dang, no way they were building electric locomotives all the way back in the 60s in India. Again, that's just like a funny little thing that like we thought was going to go somewhere and then like didn't, but is starting to again. It's funny that they were working on electric railroads all the way back then still. What's also funny is like this train looks like a modern day American train. Like you get on an Amtrak train and this is what your train looks like pretty much. Like this might look old, but it's really no different than what we are riding nowadays here in America.
Its counterparts in Madras and Bangalore build coaches and wagons. Can we be content with this? What of the sea and our long coastline? What of the exportation of our goods to other countries?
See, that's interesting too. So not only do they want the ability to manufacture their own goods that they need to maintain their industrial base, but they want the ability to transport their goods out of the country to other countries instead of just hiring foreign merchant ships, which again just would give India more power and more freedom to do its own thing, which is exactly what they wanted out of industrialization. They never wanted to be, ruled by a foreign power ever again. So the decisions they're making are not only like good decisions, but intelligent decisions. And it's so cool to see them already aware of what they need to accomplish in order to achieve what they want to achieve. It's cool.
The answer is reflected, in some measure, in the Hindustan shipyard at Visakhapatnam.
But again, just like so much stuff must have been happening. Like they were building shipyards, they were building steel factories, they were building railroad factories, like all of this at the same time. Like that's what I'm trying to convey. Like it's not crazy that they were doing any one of these things, but it's crazy that like there was just one moment where there was incentive to do it all. And it was all happening all at the same time. That's what blows my mind. And again, look how awesome these shots of the shipyard are. Like I've never actually seen a ship like mid-construction. So getting to see a ship like this is just really cool. It doesn't even matter that it's India that we're looking at. Like it's cool what I'm learning no matter where this is, Like this is crazy. It's just crazy shots of a boat being built. I've never seen shots like this before.
And in the growth of shipping tonnage. When total shipping nearly triples itself by 1966, and when a second shipyard at Cochin is commissioned, the answer will have gathered more content.
Again, it is just amazing that like they just started making these huge machines like out of pretty much nowhere. Like there was no tradition of making these like steel-hulled ships in India prior to the arrival of the British. So it's so amazing that they mastered it so quickly after the British left.
The automobile has not yet come into the common man's life in India, as it is...
That is an interesting comment, that although they had cars, the people in India probably weren't wealthy enough to actually afford cars. So they weren't really that common, even though they had the technology and the ability to make cars. They didn't have the economics to actually create a viable market for cars in India during this time at least.
Done in some other countries.
But again, they're still making cars, which means they must have been selling cars to somebody, Like it's so fascinating that they were still engaging in this highly industrial behavior when their people couldn't even afford the products of their labors. It's another aspect of industrialization that like we just don't really remember, is that the people making the modern technology available to people couldn't actually afford the modern technology they were making available. It's just like it's crazy. It's crazy to think that the peasants were the ones in the factories and the people enjoying the technology weren't in the factories at all. It's just like it's a very interesting relationship between the factory people and the people who actually enjoyed the products from the factories.
It may well be some time before it does. But the foundations are laid in the existing production of a variety of road transport and in the manufacture of over 60% of their components within the country.
See, like that's crazy. Like not only are they making cars that no Indians can afford, but they're making like 60% of the parts that go into the cars that, again, no Indian person could even afford. It's just like they're creating all these systems and all these supply chains without even having like the purpose or like ability to support them yet. It's so incredible how much was being done in this one place at this one time.
There will be greater cause for satisfaction when we make all the parts ourselves.
And again, a very smart desire to manufacture all the parts themselves. Like they very clearly understand what gives the Europeans power in this moment. And it was partially their manufacturing base. And again, this is just a really cool shot. We're getting to see like inside of a car, like with all the machinery running, but like none of the exterior. Like we're actually getting an understanding of these machines by watching this, this is really a Blue video. Like seeing the axle spinning on that car, even that, like that was really cool. I don't know, like I don't really get to see the insides of cars before they're built that much. So that was a cool thing to see.
What price all this effort if it were to bear fruit only in the future? Not always can people wait for things to turn up.
This is so funny. Whatever these big tanks are, I assume they're holding like gasoline or something, but they built little structures on top of their like silos or whatever to keep them in the shade, which I just think is so funny. Again, that seems like another little like Indianism, right? Like I don't think we built structures like this over like our oil tankers here in America. Actually, I'm certain we don't. But I guess in India, it gets hot enough where it's worth building a structure to protect your oil tankers. That's a funny difference between like the industrialization of different countries even.
This is the basis of the effort that built up fertilizer production from 18,000 tons to nearly 10 times that much.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So yeah, we can even see their fertilizer production going up, which again, to make fertilizer, you obviously can just use cow manure or whatever, but to actually produce it on like an industrial scale, you need like huge machines, the Haber-Bosch process. It's a whole involved thing. So it's interesting to see that the Indian people really only learned about this process in 1951, and they've already started producing like 10 times the amount of fertilizer they were when they first started. And again, it just goes to show how they are using information learned from Europeans to affect their own country.
All this geared to ensure freedom from hunger, for the production of more and more food to feed all of us and the many millions that join us each year.
And the many millions that join us each year. Like, isn't that so crazy? Like, India was also like bursting with new people during this time. Like, famine had sort of been eradicated, not really, obviously, but like commercial agriculture was at a point where there was enough food for most people. And because of that, the population just exploded in India during this time. So it's funny that we have a mention of that through that little comment right there.
Then there is cloth, as much a symbol of our rising expectations as any of our other products.
That's interesting, though. I feel like I already explained this, right? How the spinning wheel and making cloth was very central to the Indian independence movement. So it's interesting how they're paying attention to it in this context as well.
To meet our expanding needs, cloth production is being considerably stepped up to an annual figure of over 9,000 million yards by 1966.
9,000 million yards. That sounds like a lot, and they're using yards instead of meters, which I think is funny.
It is quite some distance from 1951, when yearly production was just about half that figure.
Again, this is just so crazy that we're inside like an Indian like textile factory right now. Like we're actually getting to see what it was like to work in one of these factories back when this was like a really important aspect of Indian like culture or society.
Self-sufficiency is our goal. To make the things we need, to build the structures we desire. In a more literal sense.
Again, they keep hitting home this idea of self-sufficiency, and I think that's a holdover from their colonial years, right? Like they have such a desire to never depend on people like the British ever again. So you have this like huge desire to be able to make every single product they need here in India. So it's interesting to see how India's industrialization was a reaction to the British colonization. Or in other words, India's industrialization was both made necessary and possible by the British presence here. That's an interesting insight into this.
Cement will do that building. The building of not merely factories, but of roads and dams, cementing with its strength.
Roads and dams. That's interesting. We've learned about dam construction in India before and how transformative it was during this period, but we haven't learned that much about roads yet.
The links between village and town, town and city, people and people. Perhaps all this cannot be done with 9 million tons of cement a year. Even the 13 million tons we expect to produce by the end of the third plan may not be sufficient.
That's crazy how they also were operating with like different levels of plans for the future. Like that's something that as an American, again, I'm very unfamiliar with. Like every plan is just a 4-year politician's plans, but it seems like their government actually has like a 5 and a 10 and a 15-year plan for development, which again, you really do need if you want to get this sort of thing done. It's impressive to see how much planning and thought really went into India's industrialization.
But it certainly makes a good start. Growing construction activity will add a fresh dimension to the scale of our effort.
Dude, again, this is so Indian though. Like in America, you would not have like a line of people just handing off cement one after the other. That's such an Indian way of like construction, is just using like so many people to get things done. You know, like in America, we'd have like a chute for all the cement to be poured down in one direction. But here they just have people hoisting it up and then pouring it by hand, which again is just a difference in like the labor and techniques and like cultures pretty much of these two places.
Will add a fresh dimension to the scale of our effort.
Yeah, just like having this many people running around a construction site is like not what you do in America. Like construction sites are places where you're careful and like you wear a hard helmet and like you don't just have tons of people walking in and out, you know, like this is very much an Indian construction site. And I say that with love. Dang, I thought that was hilarious though. The way this guy's taking their cement off of their heads and just tossing it into the pile of cement. It's so funny to see how they're working here, you know? Dang, look at all these bricks they're carrying on their heads. See, why does everyone outside of Europe just seem capable of carrying things on their heads? Like, I can't actually fathom why everyone is able to do this. Like, I've never seen people in Europe carry things on their heads, but like everywhere else in the world, people know how to carry 3 cinder blocks tall on their heads. Like, that's crazy. This is an actual, like, skill we are witnessing these women demonstrate for us.
Food for the belly, cloth for the body, a roof above. These are the...
Dang, hang on. So is this like Indian like government housing? Is this like the slums that they built like for like all the poor villagers or something? Like I'm curious about these apartment buildings.
3 objectives of the plan. But these are not the only objectives.
I'm also curious if any of my Indian viewers recognize any of these buildings. Like, obviously, these are some very specific places, but, like, I don't doubt there are some of you guys who, like, I think you know where this is.
But these are not the only objectives. Somewhere in the heart of India, a small lighted kerosene lamp tells the story of other objectives, such as the exploitation of the country's mineral resources.
What's also so funny is just how gung-ho Indians were for extracting their own resources. Like they were so about, you know, manufacturing their own steel, making all their own aluminum. Like they really did also want to take all these resources from their own country. And I don't think they understood that like that would just mean they would have fewer resources in the future. Like I think they thought of all of this as a self-reliance thing, but they didn't realize that if they use up all their resources in the future, they're going to have to go to other people to use their resources. So it is an interesting balance of we have to self-rely, but we're also going to use all of our own resources. You know, it's funny.
Like food, oil has to be extracted from the soil. And to the extent we extract more of it, to that extent, the many lamps in the many houses will be lit.
A bit of a confusing statement, but I see what he's saying. I'll let him finish.
The wheels of our industry will be lubricated.
See, the wheels of our industries will be lubricated. It's just like, Indian people can't help but like make these little poetic things.
The oil discovered in Assam and Gujarat, and the refineries constructed to process the oil, hold out the promise of better things to come.
That's interesting. So they found oil in Assam and Gujarat. If there are any, Indian oil experts, like, are these still the oil producing areas? Where does India even get its oil from? I guess they buy it now, don't they? That's what I was saying earlier, though, is they used all their oil. Now they got to buy their oil from, like, Russia, probably. Dude, again, I am just freaking jamming out, though. Shout out to Bat. That guy, Bot, whatever his name was, he's making some bangers over there.
Together with oil, electricity holds the key to development.
Dude, again, these people are so intelligent, right? Like, they already knew that, like, it wasn't enough just to have oil or fossil fuels. You also needed to be able to produce electricity and transport that across your society. Like, how advanced of an understanding for the 1960s, Like, it's so impressive to see. They must have had some really good planners or something, because they really did figure out every single different thing they needed in order to have a fully functioning modern society, which I guess is partially, the British to thank for that. But it's so interesting to see how much they knew about and how much they had during this time. Like, again, my image of India from the 60s just did not include, like, electricity power converters like this. Like, this is very, very different than what is in my mind for India.
The wires that bring light also carry the power that can move our industries, supply us with goods, and give us employment. So, over a decade and a half, the many hydroelectric and thermal power projects have pushed our capacity from 2.3 million kilowatts to more than double that figure. By 1966, this will go up a further 2.5 times.
All right, guys, I'm investing. Like, I'm buying stock in India. Like, 1960s India, that is the place to invest. Like, just all these numbers he's rattling off, like, dang, this was a businessman's dream, wasn't it? Like, that's what's so funny is I keep thinking to myself, where did India actually get the capital to build these factories? Like, the British aren't going to give them the capital. Who's actually paying for these factories? And now I'm starting to think that, like, these were all, like, private investors. Like, there probably were some, like, European or American people behind these, like, actually investing money. That's what I have to imagine, at least, because, like, how else would this, like, poor country have gotten all the money to invest in industry like this? And I don't say poor because India was poor. I say poor because they were oppressed by a colonial power, like, they didn't have their own power. So it's just incredible that they had any sort of money after the fact to invest in stuff like this. So I'm starting to get curious. I'm starting to wonder, like, where did they get this seed money from? Like, there must have been somebody giving Indians money to build this sort of stuff. I'm curious, like, the businessmen who built India, Like, obviously, most of the work was being done by Indian people, but, like, if you don't have that initial capital, you can't build a factory for Indian people to work in. So it's like, where did that initial investment come from? Did the government just take out debt, or were there business loaners involved in something like this? I'm so curious.
A beginning has also been made in the manufacture of electrical equipment. Witness to this is the Bhopal Heavy Electrical Project, designed to produce 250 million rupees worth of equipment annually.
Dang, 250 million rupees of equipment annually. See, that's crazy, especially for back then. I can only imagine how much that would be nowadays. But it's just like, to be able to produce that much value, somebody had to invest that value in, And it's just like, where is that money coming from?
Other heavy electrical projects will join it in the years to come.
Like, I don't doubt there were wealthy people in India, but I just feel like the wealthy people were like the kings, and their wealth was stored mainly in, like, land and the peasants on the land. I don't think there was a lot of liquid cash or gold at this point in India. Like, I don't know. I would like somebody to explain it to me, I guess. But from all the these shots, they do look like legit factories. Like it does seem like they are producing a lot of goods in these factories. Like whether or not these goods were sold or used, I don't know, but it seems like these factories were crazy productive.
During the years...
Oh, okay, now are we starting to get it? Wow, okay, this is exactly what I asked for. We're learning about public investment now. This might be the most important part.
1951-1961, investment in industries, power, transport, and communications amounted to over 35,000 million rupees.
35,000 million rupees. So hang on, is that 35 billion rupees? Am I doing the math right on that? So 35 billion rupees was publicly invested by the people of India into the building of factories. That's interesting. I never would have expected. Is that taxes or are people like donating that? But that is interesting because that does help explain, at least partially, how India got the funds to build some of these factories. I still don't know if that's quite enough to build every single factory I've seen in this program so far, but it seems like that's a good start for being able to produce stuff like this.
In the 5 years of the current plan, even greater sums are slated for expenditure.
Oh, hang on. So is this public investment in the sense that the government is spending its money? I thought this was public investment in the sense that the public people were giving the government money to invest. But I think this is just talking about this is how the government is choosing to invest its dollars, which were collected publicly through taxes and whatnot. I think that's what we're talking about here.
Industrial production was almost...
Oh, this will be an interesting graph, the graph on industrial production.
...almost doubled during the first two plans. By the end...
See, they keep talking about their plans. Like, eras of time are divided based on what part of the plan they were in. That's so interesting to me.
End of the third plan, it is expected to rise a further 70%.
Look at this bar graph. Again, like this is the time to invest in India right here. Like take my money, build a factory and wherever you want, build whatever you want, but I would like to see returns like this.
What do these cold figures mean? Do they add up to something significant? Have they radically transformed our lives? The answer is, not yet.
That's interesting. I was actually waiting for the answer. I was thinking, yes, it kind of seems like all these changes have radically affected everyone's lives. But it's interesting how they're saying it hasn't affected them yet. I wonder why. I wonder what the explanation behind that answer is.
For they mark only the beginning of an effort.
Oh, okay. It marks only the beginning. See, again, like the Indian people are so forward thinking, or at least in this regard. They knew it. They knew India was down, but they also knew India was getting back up during this time. So it's so funny how they refuse to say, oh, this is good now, this is acceptable now. They are all hell bent on, exceeding their future expectations even. Again, it's such an interesting moment in like the Indian spirit and the Indian mentality towards work. It's just, again, we're so lucky we get to see stuff like this.
To give us a better deal, to make available...
Oh, look, they actually have ceiling fans. If you guys really have been watching this channel, you know that I love the Indian floor fans, but here they actually do have ceiling fans. That's not really interesting unless you've watched the other videos with me, but that is a funny little note.
More things today than a decade ago.
What I do think is interesting, though, is most of these, like, upscale, Indian homes do reflect, like, European senses or European houses a lot more than I imagined they would. Like this kind of just looks like a plain American house, just the person who lives there has a whole bunch of like Indian knickknacks or whatever, like this looks like an Indian immigrants to America's house. But isn't this so interesting? Like, here's a bunch of Indian kids gathered around the radio, just how American kids are gathered around the radio at the same exact time. I feel like I'm having so many misconceptions of India broken right now. Like, they had access to all this technology. Maybe not everyone in India, but at least like the Indian elite people, like that's what I imagine these kids are. At least they had access to radio. I just think it's interesting that the rich kids in India had pretty much the same amenities that the rich kids in America had. Like there really wasn't that much of a difference between these two societies' peaks. Like kids still gathered around the radio in America and India all the same. That's so interesting. What brand is that soda? I'm so curious about this like drink brand. Is this like an Indian soda, or is it like, I don't know, like I'm so curious. But let's just take a moment to look at their fridge. They just have vegetables, like no bags, no like organization. There's just what look like tomatoes or apples just like in a pile. It's just like, I don't know if anyone was actually using this fridge for this purpose. Like, this is probably staged, but it's funny to think that like this is how people would organize their fridges back in the day. Just like all produce, just like everywhere, no organization. That's just like a funny way to imagine people using their fridges back in the day.
In the case of workers like Madhav, it has meant a change. Not perhaps to warrant ecstasy, but a change for the better all the same. There are freer surroundings and new hopes for him and his family. The substance, then, of a decade of development is in the endeavor.
No way, they're playing volleyball? That I really wasn't expecting. I don't know why, but like volleyball especially, that's just like a sport from America, you know? It's not even like a British thing to play volleyball. So it's just, it's so funny to see Indian people playing volleyball. Like I'm so curious about that. Like how did they learn this game? I don't know.
To bring about a change in the life of the people, in the variety of things which India now produces.
Look at all these women working in factories making like what look like the most complex machines ever, you know? Like it's also interesting to see just how much women were encouraged to take part in the industrialization of India, you know? Like it's not just the men who were allowed in factories. It was women who were making, you know, machines like this. Like this feels like a very, oh no, men gotta make it because it's hard sort of thing. But no, you can clearly see that like it was women working on this sort of stuff too. It's just, it's interesting all the way down, man. And what's interesting about that is here in America, women only started working in factories as a result of World War I and World War II. Like when all the men were away fighting a war, that's when we finally allowed women to come in and start working in the factories. But here in India, they didn't really have that. There was no World War II for Indians. Well, I guess, you know, Indian people participated in World War II, but this is post-World War II, and they're still inviting women into their factories. So even though they had all the men they needed, women were still allowed into factories, or at least that's what this is telling us, which is just, you know, again, interesting. Oh, it looks like these women were making radios. That's interesting because they pretty much were like the most complex machine a person would have. So that's funny how women were making radios back in the day. Yeah, I'll admit it, it is actually impressive to see like how many products were being pushed out of these Indian factories. Like, again, I'm not very familiar with factories and how much productivity takes place in them, but like seeing all the identical products that were coming out of these factories in like the 60s of India is just like, I am impressed. I will admit that. Like, it's one thing to have a whole bunch of chairs, but it's another thing to have a whole line of, like, functioning refrigerators that you built. Like, those aren't the same level of product, you know? So it really is impressive to see how many products of modern technology they were constructing, even back then.
Certainly none of these are enough for our needs. Certainly, there is a long way to go.
I feel like these fans are like iconic fans. Like I feel like every Indian person in all of India, in all the world has a fan like this. Can my Indian audience tell me if that's true? Do you guys like have a special association with these fans? I feel like I've seen these fans before. So you guys must have like some memory or some relation to these fans. I don't know. I don't know if that's just me, but I feel like these are like an iconic fan in India.
A lot of road yet to be covered. But the first steps have been taken.
See, yeah, the fact that they're manufacturing sewing machines so that their people can actually sew more garments, it really is an impressive degree of industrial accomplishment here.
The shape of a different...
Oh, look at all this. These are like Vespas. That's so funny. I did not think that they would have vehicles like this in India or anywhere else in the world, really. Like, that's a funny little sort of vehicle that I guess was just about to make it big in this part of the world.
And more acceptable future is being slowly molded.
What's really funny to think about is like all of these products probably were purchased and used by Indians. So like all those little like motorcycles or all these bikes, like these definitely were used to take Indian people to and from work and where else they wanted to go. It's funny. It's funny to think that we're actually seeing things that were used by people. I don't know. I don't know if that's funny or if that's just like the most normal thing ever, but I have to always keep that in mind when I'm seeing products like this. There we go. The End. Produced by Films Division, Government of India. Industrial India. All right, so that was The End. I will say this was a very enjoyable watch. I feel like we got to see so many different factories in India. This really was an impressive tour of India's industrial capacity during the 1960s. Like the fact that I saw like cars, trains, refrigerators, radios, like they were pretty much manufacturing all the most advanced products of the age. Like they weren't just making clothes or salt or anything. They were making like highly complex like electronic gadgets for people to use. Like I feel like that is probably the biggest takeaway from this, that India wasn't some like undeveloped place even in the 60s. Like they were manufacturing refrigerators for people to use. Like I'm having that knowledge and that understanding, I feel like illuminates India's history a lot more for me, at least. Like I understand where this country is coming from now, having seen where they were during this time. It's so cool to see a country's literal rise. Before 1947, again, India was a colony, so they didn't really get to prosper on their own terms. So what we're seeing here is India, for the first time in like 100 years, getting the opportunity to work for itself. And that's really what we're seeing here, is India is finally investing in itself. And I feel like that is the reason why there was such a rapid industrialization in this country, is that all of a sudden, everyone in the country was on board with the same mission, and that was to never let themselves become colonized ever again. And they were accomplishing that through their economic and industrial independence. So that's really what this is about. It's not about India's political independence, but it's about India's economic and industrial independence. They were actually able to manufacture everything they needed eventually because of all this. So what we're seeing here really is a form of India's Independence Day. This is like how India sustained its own independence. And again, seeing how they went about that reveals something about the Indian character or the Indian culture. Seeing how this specific group of people went about accomplishing this specific goal, we can see that they were very focused on exactly what they needed to be to accomplish what they wanted. So after watching this, I'll say I have a whole bunch more respect for India, the country, and India, the people. I'm very impressed with how they were able to organize their own like catching up of the rest of the world. Like they clearly knew what they needed to do and how they needed to do it. And at least based on this program, they did it. They caught up industrially to the rest of the world. They were manufacturing their own refrigerators. Like how many countries nowadays can say that, Like India really did accomplish something truly impressive all the way back then. And I feel like that's what this program illustrates. It's just the impressive accomplishment of industrializing India. That's the moral of the story. It was a Herculean task to industrialize India, and they did it. So there you go. That is definitely something that Indian people should be proud of. So I think it's time to tell you all that if you enjoyed watching and would like to help support what I do here, you can follow the link in the description that'll take you over to the Internet Archive. The Internet Archive is where I get all these old programs from. So if you want to support what I do, go donate to them. And with that, I think we're ready to cut to black.